On June 8, 1967, in the middle of the Six-Day War, a United States Navy ship called the USS Liberty came under attack in the eastern Mediterranean. The attackers were not an enemy of the United States, but forces from Israel, a country already closely tied to Washington. In just under half an hour, Israeli aircraft and motor torpedo boats struck the ship with strafing runs, napalm, cannon fire, and torpedoes. 34 Americans were killed, and 171 were wounded. The Liberty survived, but the incident became one of the most controversial moments in modern U.S. naval history. Official inquiries by both governments concluded the attack was a tragic mistake. Many survivors and critics have insisted for decades that the explanation does not fit the facts. To understand why the Liberty was there, it helps to understand the war around it. The Six-Day War began on June 5, 1967, when Israel launched strikes against neighboring Arab states, including Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. The conflict moved quickly and dramatically. By June 8, Israel was fighting Egypt in and around the Sinai Peninsula, and the United States was closely monitoring events. The USS Liberty was a technical research ship, a term that described its intelligence-gathering role. In plain language, it was a spy ship, equipped to collect signals and communications. Its mission was not to fight battles, but to listen, analyze, and report from international waters. The Liberty was positioned north of the Sinai Peninsula, roughly 25.5 nautical miles northwest of the Egyptian city of Arish. That location mattered. It placed the ship outside territorial waters, but near an active battlefield where Israeli and Egyptian forces were engaged. Ships in such positions can become politically sensitive because they may be able to intercept communications, observe military movements, or gather information that governments would rather keep hidden. At the same time, international waters do not make a vessel invisible or invulnerable. A ship still needs to be identified correctly by nearby forces, especially during a fast-moving war. On this day, that process failed with devastating consequences. The attack began from the air. Israeli Air Force jet fighters, including Mirage 3 and Super Mystère aircraft, struck the USS Liberty with strafing runs and napalm. Strafing meant the jets fired directly at the ship with guns, targeting the decks and exposed areas. Napalm added fire and chaos, making damage control harder and increasing the danger to the crew. For sailors aboard a non-combatant intelligence ship, the sudden arrival of high-speed aircraft was terrifying and confusing. The Liberty was not built like a frontline warship, and although it had some defensive weapons, it was not designed to withstand a coordinated air attack by modern jets. The assault did not end with the aircraft. Israeli Navy motor torpedo boats also approached and opened fire. These smaller, fast attack craft carried torpedoes capable of inflicting catastrophic damage on a larger ship. During the sea phase of the attack, torpedoes were launched at the Liberty. One struck the ship, tearing a large hole in its side and killing many crew members in the affected area. According to accounts summarized in official histories, Israeli forces stopped after the torpedo hit because they believed the vessel was sinking. The combined air and sea attack lasted about 23 minutes, but for the men aboard, it was long enough to transform a routine intelligence mission into a battle for survival. The human cost was severe. 34 crew members died, including naval officers, enlisted sailors, 2 Marines, and 1 civilian employee of the National Security Agency. Another 171 crew members were wounded, a staggering number for a single ship. The casualty figures show how exposed the Liberty was once the attack began. Survivors had to fight fires, treat wounded shipmates, control flooding, restore communications, and keep the vessel afloat. The torpedo damage alone could have doomed the ship. Yet the crew's actions prevented an even greater disaster. The Liberty remained afloat and eventually made it to safety, but the trauma of the attack stayed with survivors for the rest of their lives. Israel's explanation was that the attack was a case of mistaken identity. Israeli authorities said their forces believed the USS Liberty was an Egyptian vessel, not an American ship. In war, mistaken identification can happen, especially when units are operating under pressure, relying on incomplete information, and expecting enemy activity nearby. The Israeli government apologized to the United States and later paid compensation. Official Israeli and American inquiries both concluded that the attack was not intentional, but the result of confusion about the ship's identity. This became the formal position of both governments, a tragic error during a chaotic war, not a deliberate attack on an ally. But the official explanation never settled the issue for many of those who lived through it. Survivors and critics have argued that the ship should have been identifiable as American, and that the duration and nature of the attack raised troubling questions. They point to the ship's presence in international waters, the intensity of the assault, and the sequence of air and naval attacks as reasons for doubt. Some have said they believed the attackers had enough opportunity to recognize the Liberty before the worst damage occurred. These arguments do not, by themselves, prove intent, but they explain why the controversy endured. For survivors, the question was not abstract, it was tied to the deaths of friends and shipmates. The controversy deepened because some prominent figures later challenged the official conclusion. Admiral Thomas Hinman Moore, who later became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, accused President Lyndon B. Johnson of covering up the idea that the attack had been deliberate. In 2004, Ward Boston, who had served as chief counsel to the U.S. Navy's Board of Inquiry, signed an affidavit stating that Johnson and Defense Secretary Robert McNamara had ordered the inquiry to conclude that the attack was a case of mistaken identity. Boston claimed this happened despite what he described as overwhelming evidence to the contrary. These statements became central to arguments that politics shaped the official record. Why would a government avoid a harder conclusion? Supporters of the cover-up argument point to the political stakes of 1967. The United States was deeply involved in the Cold War, managing relationships in the Middle East, and already consumed by the Vietnam War. A direct confrontation with Israel over the deaths of American sailors could have created a major diplomatic crisis. On the other hand, defenders of the official position argue that wartime confusion is plausible and that the inquiries, apologies, and compensation support the conclusion of a mistake. The tension between these interpretations is why the Liberty incident remains so difficult. The same event can be viewed through the lens of battlefield error or through the lens of state secrecy. After the attack, Israel paid several rounds of compensation. In May 1968, the Israeli government paid $3.32 million to the U.S. government for the families of the 34 men killed. In March 1969, it paid another $3.57 million to the men who had been wounded. Years later, in December 1980, Israel agreed to pay $6 million as a final settlement for material damage to the ship, including interest accumulated over 13 years. Compensation did not end the dispute, but it showed that the incident had formal diplomatic consequences. Money could address legal claims and material losses, but it could not resolve the deeper question of intent. The USS Liberty incident is remembered because it sits at the intersection of war, intelligence, alliance politics, and unresolved grief. The basic facts are clear: an American intelligence ship was attacked by Israeli forces during the Six-Day War, 34 people were killed, 171 were wounded, the ship was badly damaged, and both governments officially called it a mistake. The dispute is over what those facts mean. Was the attack an extreme example of battlefield misidentification, or was the official explanation shaped by political necessity? More than half a century later, the Liberty remains a case study in how wartime events can be investigated, explained, challenged, and remembered in very different ways. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.